Hi, good evening, everyone in South Asia, and good morning to the people in Denver and rest of the world. So today we're continuing our LabVIEW Champions and LabVIEW Personalities interview in our LabVIEW Advantage YouTube channel. In this series, we speak with the LabVIEW Personalities and LabVIEW Champions and explore their adventure with LabVIEW, their contribution to the community, and how they have shaped the way we interact with the LabVIEW and the NI ecosystem. Today, we have got the fresh new LabVIEW champion all the way from Denver, United States. He's no other than the Sam Taggart. Okay, Sam, welcome to the interview and congratulations again. So you can give us like your brief introduction and how you started with LabVIEW, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
present.
thank you for that great introduction, Ram. So I just watched your interview with Chris Cellino, at least the
Wow.
beginning of it. It was great. And I started out kind of like Chris. I was not a computer programmer. I was an electrical engineer.
Uh-huh.
And coming out of college, I was having trouble finding a job. And a friend of mine worked at this company that built nuclear power plants, and they happened to be hiring. And so he got me a job there. And I replaced this guy who worked in their research and technology center. And so at first I thought, like, oh, this is great. You know, I'm going to do all this cutting edge research and stuff. And it turned out that I was working on a 15-year-old circuit board tester to test 40-year-old circuit boards. So it was a little bit of a letdown. But the circuit board tester happened to be written in LabVIEW, which turned out to be very nice. And that was where I learned probably like the biggest lesson I've learned doing LabVIEW is that it's not enough to just make it work, right? It's got to be reliable, maintainable, and all that stuff, because they had the circuit board tester, and on the outside it looked great. Right? It had moving parts, and it had a whole bunch of instruments, and everything seemed to work. But when you look closer, there were all these little faults, and all these things didn't work right, and they had all these workarounds. And basically, I got charged with maintaining this circuit board tester, and they sent me off to a LabVIEW. Back then, it wasn't even Core 1. It was like Basics 1 or something. And so I went to the LabVIEW Basics course, and I learned all the things you're not supposed to do. You know, they're like, oh, don't ever use global variables. Don't use sequence structures, right? And I opened it up, and the main VI is a sequence structure that's like 18 frames deep.
Wow.
And only frame 17 actually does anything because he needed 16 frames to initialize all the global variables. And it was just like, oh, man, what did I get into? And so that tester actually up till today is probably still running the same software, because I don't think anybody ever wanted to touch it. So it was one of those things where, like, you know, how much would it cost to touch this? I was like, or to fix this. I was like, I don't know. I was like, I can't. I'll break everything else trying to fix this one little.
Yeah, must have been like running for a long time, and you inherited that code. So,
and surprisingly, it worked. You know, I saw a presentation a long time ago by Elijah Carey where he showed like this big spaghetti block diagram. He was like, you know what I hate most about this? That it actually works. You know, because if it doesn't work, it's really easy to walk in and say, well, that doesn't work, throw it away, start over. But when it kind of works, like, well, we don't want to invest any money in that. So my crusade has been trying to help people write better codes so that I don't inherit any more messes like that.
Yes, Sam. Like I actually saw your tagline on your LinkedIn as well, helping people writing better code. I think that was the inspiration you received from your first encounter with that, huge code and everything. But I believe if you do not follow what you are actually following at the moment, for example, you want people to help write a better code and everything. That basically means not only functional, but also adding new functionalities in the future and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So writing stuff that's maintainable, so it's easy to expand it in the future. Yeah. Well, the one thing I'm finding is that writing the LabVIEW code is generally the easy part. More is the design and the other processes that go on around it, like using source code control and testing and all those things. And those are the things that I find more challenging. So and those are the things that I think people kind of struggle with a lot.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So Sam, you are also the I've seen your a profile on LinkedIn. You are the adjunct professor as well in the University of Coal Mine, something like that. As well as you are the certified professional instructor as well. So
yeah. Okay, so yeah, I guess I should elaborate more on how I came from.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I was working for Westinghouse, that was in Pittsburgh. They were the company that made the nuclear, and that was actually where I met Nancy.
Oh,
So
Nancy Hansen. Oh.
yeah,
Oh,
Nancy's awesome. I'm sure you know.
yeah.
Hopefully all the readers know or listeners know. But yeah, so she used to be head of the Champions program, and along with Chris. And Westinghouse at that time was a really big customer of NI, and they were trying to do this whole center of excellence thing. And so Nancy got involved, and I met her a bunch. And then at some point, my wife was a ski instructor at the local little ski hill in Pittsburgh, and she decided she couldn't be a good enough skier. She didn't move to Colorado. So we moved to Colorado. I quit, and I moved out here. And that's when I did some teaching because I was having trouble finding work, and the local university I was advertised that they were looking for people to teach classes. So I taught a few classes. They're not really LabVIEW related. It was more signal processing and yeah, digital signal processing and something on control systems. So it was kind of related, but it wasn't really programming.
That was like a quite interesting because previously like I had conversation with Chris Roebuck in the beginning, and then he mentioned that like he was the physicist. And yesterday like I had a conversation with Chris Chilino. He said like he was the chemical engineer as well. So that was like a little bit, you know, the interesting part of that one. Yeah. So yeah, continue. Yes, Sam.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that's like super common because like everybody I run into, they're like, "Yeah, I'm not a computer scientist or computer engineer." So
yeah. So Sam, like in your experience, like you have been like a certified professional instructor as well, and I think in your career, like you had the opportunity to work, like you said, like you inherited a code, and then like maybe you had the opportunity to work in a team or working solo or something like that. So what do you think, like, what are the challenges you face when you are working alone, or as of now, like you have started your own firm at the moment, helping the customer succeed, developing you know, better applications and software using LabVIEW?
Yeah, so when I started out at Westinghouse in the Research and Technology Center, I was the only LabVIEW person there. Nobody else in the I don't think anybody else in the entire country even knew what LabVIEW was. Wow. And pretty quickly they hired a few other people, and I was actually in a really good position. So I heard your interview with Francois where he talked about how he worked at some like government agency, and so he had a little bit of free time to like stuff. Yeah, so I had a lot of free time to research stuff, which was really nice because I just spent lots of time poring over LabVIEW books and lava posts, and so that was really. And being in this like central location, I got to work on all kinds of different projects. So like anybody who had a project come up that needed any LabVIEW stuff came to us. And then after a while, this other group that we did some projects for, they hired some LabVIEW people. And so I started working with them. We had a small team of like 2 or 3 people going, and it worked pretty well. And then at one point they bought a company somewhere else in the country, like up in Massachusetts. And so and we were working remotely with, or they were working remotely, and it definitely introduced a lot of issues and personalities. And I really liked Chris's talk about getting everybody on the same page because because we were not on the same page at all, and like, you know, it was just a mess. Like we inherited this one program from this guy, and like he had like, I don't know what he was doing, but he had a VI that had probably like 1,000 controls on it, and he had one frame with all the controls in it, and then he referenced everyone by name using VI server throughout the entire program.
Oh, crazy!
And it's really hard to debug and figure out what was going on, and you know, but that was his style, and that was the way he did things, and you know, we just inherited it. I was like, oh, and trying to work with him and get him to change. So definitely, there's some pain there.
Yeah, very interesting. Like 1,000 controls. You cannot even like imagine like having like that.
Yeah, no, it's just it's crazy. Well, part of it was, I guess, this particular project. Westinghouse, they had this old system that they built in like the 70s because they built nuclear power plants. So a lot of the plants were built in the 70s. And this was like, 2010 or something. So a lot of these systems have been around for 40 years and they're starting to fail. And so their competitor was out selling all these systems that were new. And since those were built in the 70s, they didn't have any computers or anything. You're turning knobs and dials and switches.
Yeah.
And so this competitor had this new system that had all these fancy graphics. And so Westinghouse decided that, well, we want these fancy graphics. So they hired this guy to make all the fancy graphics. And all he did was the graphics. So he spent like this incredible amount of time building this huge graphics thing that looked awesome, but underneath the scenes, it did nothing. And we're like trying to figure out what's going on. And part of the reason the VI was huge because he had picture control for the entire front panel. And it was huge. It was like they just come out with like the ultra high def 4K monitors or something. And so he put it on a 4K monitor, which was really funny because the whole thing had to go in this tiny little rack and you couldn't fit the monitor in the rack. It was one of those projects where like, they got ahead of themselves and like, oh yeah, we could do all this fancy stuff. And they didn't stop and plan well enough. So,
yeah. So Sam, like, when was you actually, started, for example, you discussed that, the limitations in how they develop the applications. For example, the user interface was really good. The customer was very happy with the user interface, but when you have to debug or like, for example, in the case of developer, like you or me or someone who inherits the code, it's a pain. Or like, sometimes like I was working closely with the, AE team of National Instruments, where I was consulting for the last 2 years. And the application engineering team would used to receive the code for the support from the customers. And sometimes like it actually like make you cry because you cannot understand like so many controls, like the diagram is going all over the place, so many property nodes, and like it's like crazy stuff. Like you said, like a sequence structures all over the place, too many loops, and they're like a while loops under while loop under while loop and all these kind of things. So like when did you started implementing like trying to educate the customers about like recommended guidelines and so on?
Yeah. So as a side note, I really think sometimes those people are like in their own weird way or kind of geniuses, because if you ask them, they know what all that stuff does. And I don't know how. I can't figure any of it out. But somehow in their head, they're like, oh, yeah, this goes here and here, and then it flows back around. And you're just like, wow. So, I got lucky. I started out, my boss at Westinghouse valued training. And so before I even started working on that big circuit board tester, he sent me away to go do LabVIEW Basics 1 and 2. And then I got really lucky in that I convinced him to buy me that training and certification membership. Because otherwise, I don't think I would be certified. I don't think they had any interest in paying to get somebody certified. But I got this training and certification membership. I was like, oh, I can get certified for free. So like, yeah, of course I'm going to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And so I started taking a whole bunch of classes and started, learning the right way to do it. And then, when we started working with the other group from Massachusetts, that really brought it home that like, hey, we've really got to change what we're doing. But like when I started, and I don't know how long you've been doing LabVIEW or when you started, but back like, I want to say 2007, like source code control, at least for me, like people were not using source code control where I was. And I think Chris said, like, when he went to chemical engineering school, they don't teach you computer programming, right? And if they do, they teach you this like, they teach you how to write really basic programs, but they don't teach you how to work in a team. They don't teach you how to do requirements management or any of that like surrounding process. And so, until they hired the other LabVIEW guy at the other location, nobody was using Subversion or anything. And the first NI class I went to where I saw Subversion, I was like, that is awesome. I was like, I'm going to go use that. And I just immediately like installed it on my computer. I was like, because that big, huge program that the guy wrote, like if I change something, how the heck would I ever change it back or remember what I changed?
Correct.
Yeah. And like, I was afraid to like move one wire because I was afraid I'd break something. So like having a way to go back in time and like undo things just seemed like such a brilliant idea at the time.
Yeah, like a source code control is like a really, really awesome, like, saves you a lot of time and sometimes like your project as well.
Yeah. And then like, So going from source code control to all the other stuff, that's just kind of been me going to all the CLA summits, GDevCon, the European CLA summit. And I mean, like, if you go and you listen to people like James McNally and Fab and Alan and everybody else you've had on, like, they're all talking about this stuff. And I'm just like sitting there and I'm looking, I'm like, well, these guys are really smart and they're saying I should be doing this. I was like, I should probably be doing this, you know? Like, I think I'll follow these guys because they seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. So, Sam, when did you you said you were working with a Westinghouse and like all these kind of things. So when was your first encounter? You already mentioned that you met all these other people at a CLA summit and all these kind of things. So what value do you think that did this certification not only improved your improved your certification or a proof of you can write a quality code, or did it actually added the value to your organization and all these kind of things?
Yeah, so I don't think that anybody in the organization really cared that I was certified. I don't think it really did much that way. I think it was a really nice feather in my cap when I wanted to start off on my own. That was really useful. I mean, I think you'll probably agree, like, the certificate is kind of just a piece of paper that says, hey, I passed this test, right? I mean, it's all about the gain and the confidence and the skill. I'm trying to remember what the first big project that I wrote myself, because I did a whole bunch of stuff where I was like fixing old projects for quite a while. I think one of the first big projects I did, which actually kind of got shelved, is a refactoring project. Actually, I took one of these big chunks of code that kind of looked like global variables everywhere and all that, and I kind of refactored and actually made it look pretty nice. But unfortunately, they never really implemented it. So I was kind of disappointed when I did that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the other projects we did. We did a project with compact field point, if you remember that. Boxes. That was probably my first project that I actually did almost all the coding completely by myself.
Wow!
But my boss had this thing of like he had the right idea. He wanted the code to be reusable and stuff. So like I remember saying for like the circuit board tester had this like 3-axis arm that moved around, and we had this other project that needed a 3-axis arm. He's like, oh, you can just grab the code out of there. Well, of course I did, but then I drug like 300 global variables with me, and like I plopped it down, everything was broken and nothing worked. And I was like, oh man. So like that really didn't work. So I mean, he had the right idea. It's just you kind of have to design your software to allow that. It doesn't just happen by chance.
Yeah.
So that was kind of when I started getting more into the whole design process and managing dependencies and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So Sam, after observing, seeing all this code and everything, the entire your experience and everything. So if you had met now, let's say, if you meet the guy, who wrote that, the code at the Westinghouse. If you meet that guy, now, what advice would you like to give to him or her? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know. I actually have met the guy, so I don't know. Yeah, I just kind of rolled my eyes when I talked to him a little bit. I tried not to, but yeah. I mean, I think in his defense, I will say in his defense, we have it pretty nice. A buddy of mine he has a emulator or something on his computer. He's running Windows 3.1. He had the original, I don't know, LabVIEW 3 or something running on a computer. And so a lot of the bad code was because back in the day, they didn't have, you can write object-oriented frameworks now. But you couldn't do that back then. And a lot of the code was doing stuff with references to controls and stuff that you can do now, but you couldn't do it back then. And so there a lot of the what I would call junky code was workarounds to get around some of the limitations of LabVIEW.
Yeah.
So, and also I think too, the guy probably came from a text programming language background. And I think those people tend to abuse variables a lot, like your local and global variables. And I don't know. From my point of view, it just creates all kinds of problems. But
yeah, that's really, really, really interesting. So Sam, like, when was the first time you encountered this, like, uh, elite kind of LabVIEW programmer? So, like, let's say, like a LabVIEW community. Like, do you have a LabVIEW community? You said like you recently moved into Colorado. So, where were you working before? And then, like, how's the LabVIEW community over there?
Yeah, so at Westinghouse, when I first started, the only real LabVIEW community I had was the local sales rep, Evan, who was pretty awesome. He was great. He and Nancy, and then we started to get a small community going at Westinghouse. We did some things, and Evan put together some meetings, like local user group meetings, but they were like, once a quarter maybe, and like 4 or 5 people would show up. So then I got really exposed to stuff when I went to the CLA summit for the first time. That was eye-opening. That was like back in like 2011 or something. And I just remember sitting in the room and being like, wow, these guys are all like super smart. There's but it's really weird feeling being at the CLA summit, right? Because you're there and everybody's super smart or they wouldn't be there. But like you're talking to people and it becomes apparent, at least it is to me, that everybody's really smart in their like narrow area. Like somebody might know everything there's to know about vision and somebody else knows everything there's to know about FPGA. But you start talking to them outside their area and like, yeah, I don't know anything about that. Yeah, so it's kind of this weird feeling. Well, then you have people like Mercer who just like knows everything. But
yeah, Steven Mercer, yeah, crazy. Yeah. Really interesting.
Although I actually heard him say he didn't know something the other day on one of the forum posts. Like, yeah, he's like, that's where my knowledge stops, and I almost fell over it. Because I always thought that guy was the smartest guy ever. So, yeah, going to that, I found I learned a ton. And then going to NI Week is just, learn tons of stuff. I mean, NI Week has actually gotten a lot better over the years now that they're doing the CPI track and the Champions stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I remember the first time I went.
So Sam, like, continue, Sam. Yeah, sorry.
I was just saying, I remember like the first time I met, it was like hit or miss. Like I'd walk into some presentations and it would just be this marketing stuff, and you're just like within 5 minutes, you're like, I'm interested. But then you'd walk in and like, Alan or somebody would be talking, be like, oh, this guy, I'm gonna go listen to this guy,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like like you meet your kind of people, and then like they are speaking with like a full kind of what is your passion and everything. Like they want to know everything about LabVIEW. They want to make LabVIEW better for everyone. So Sam, like you are also like presenting this time at NI Week.
Yeah, I'm doing a presentation on continuous integration, and basically I bit off way more than I could chew. I had this great idea of this thing that I was going to do, and it didn't work out. But I'm still going to make a good presentation out of it, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, please tell us to our viewers, and like maybe like other LabVIEW champions and other people might also be excited, like what Sam is presenting on. Maybe like a little bit of abstract, and like after taking this session, what they can learn from this part.
Yeah, so the session is basically continuous integration with GitLab. And so I walk through a very simple demo, and I give you guys all the files and everything that you need to run this demo. And it's basically, you download this project, you check it into GitLab, and then you write out the little CI file that tells it to do XYZ. And it walks you through how to set up the build machine so it'll build it. And then you upload it, and it fails, and then you make some changes, you upload it, and it passes, and you kind of see how all that works. And it's how to set up that communication. That's like the first part. And the second half of it is kind of 2 discussions. One is just on best practices of kind of how to make all that code that does the continuous integration reusable, so you don't have to rewrite it every time. And then the other discussion, which is what I really wanted my presentation to be about, was how to get GitLab to launch virtual machines automatically. Because I don't know if you go through this, but I work on lots of different projects, and every project I end up with its own separate virtual machine because it's got different drivers, it's got different versions of LabVIEW. And I have this server sitting here that does my continuous integration stuff. But if I really want every project to be isolated, I need a separate virtual machine for the development, and then I need a separate virtual machine to do the builds and the tests and all that stuff. And it just becomes a bear. And I don't want to have 20 machines running on my virtual machines running on my server just in the off chance that I decide I'm going to like make some changes over here and push it, I'd like the GitLab CI server to be able to say, hey, okay, I'm running this job. It requires this particular virtual machine. Launch it and register it and run it. And apparently, if you use VirtualBox, that's already built in. But I don't. I use VMware. And I was trying to figure out how to do that. And I came up blank. I ran into a whole bunch of problems. So hopefully, if I go to NI Week, somebody else smarter will look at the problem and be like, oh, yeah, here's how you fix it. But
yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe it's not fixable. So I don't know.
I think like these people like come up with something. Hopefully, you know, lots of people like all the LabVIEW champions will be there, and then hopefully like one or two presentation will be there. Otherwise, you know, like Steven Mercer or like anyone from the NI can help you out with that one.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think that's a big problem for me with the LabVIEW development. It's just managing all this bloat that happens because, you know, the versions don't play well together and all the drivers. And so I don't know if there's a better solution. Somebody had mentioned trying to run LabVIEW in a Docker container. I'm not like super IT guy, but I know there's been some attempts to do that. I don't think anybody has. So that would make my life a lot easier. But
so Sam, like you are like not only the LabVIEW champion, but you are also the certified professional instructor for NI as well. And like from all this entire experience and everything, like what do you want to, you know, tell the, you know, the budding LabVIEW developers, like want to get into the LabVIEW career, or like who have already been using LabVIEW for a while and may not have, you know, taken the formal training and might be creating like a local variables all over the place or global variable all over the place, or like too many controls in the user interface, or like people like who already are like more experienced, but like they are solo developers, so they are not aware about these best practices.
Yeah. So basically, I look at training as an investment, right? If you take the training and I feel like the training makes you more efficient, right? Makes your code better, easier to maintain. It makes your life easier. Now, part of that is you got to be humble enough to actually learn and not come into the class with everything already. Because sometimes people do that and it's just like, okay, you know, but yeah. But the other thing I try to tell people is like, I think especially the beginning LabVIEW classes, they're really good at teaching you how to make it work. But that's only like the smallest part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because part of it's making it work, and okay, and you can even make it work and make it look pretty and not use local and global variables, but it's still not a good solution in the sense that it's not scalable and maintainable, and you know. So part of it is like the art part of writing code is figuring out how to make something that's going to make your life easier down the road. So, you know, I always try like to give people tips and tricks on like, okay, here's what we're teaching you how to do. Here's how you use it in real life, and here are the caveats. Like in this situation, it's probably not appropriate to do this, even though you can, and the class teaches you and shows you how to do that. Don't ever do this kind of thing. Because there are some situations where like they teach something in the class, and I know why they're doing it, and it's simplifying it, but it's like, okay, yeah, don't do that. So I don't know. Do you teach classes? I know you do the CLA, CLD certification.
Yeah, I train a little bit, but like I'm not the certified professional instructor, so I wanted to know your perspective, and then, you know, different kind of, you know, like customers you made, like engineers and everyone. So
yeah, it's a fine line teaching the class because you've got to like, you know, follow the NI guidelines, and you know, NI has what they want you to teach. But I definitely add a little flavor here and there. I'm like, okay, yeah. You know, and sometimes it'll show me how to do something. Be like, well, there's a much easier way. Go here and do this.
And that's very interesting. Yeah. So Sam, like, I think when was your like the first time? What was the year you used the LabVIEW for the first time?
Oh, but that was probably like 2007. So almost a dozen years now.
Wow, so that's a long experience. So Sam, like you have been using like a LabVIEW for a long time, and then there were like many different versions without the object-oriented programming, without the LabVIEW project, and all this kind of stuff. We had heard this kind of stuff in like the previous interviews as well with other champions as well. So what do you think? Like the direction like LabVIEW has taken at the moment, the NI R&D team has like invested a lot. They have built LabVIEW NXE now to address some of the limitations of previous LabVIEW. So what do you think like the direction it is taking? Are you fully satisfied with it? Some of the things maybe like you might have thought that, okay, this feature has to be in LabVIEW, like it still hasn't been added yet? Or what is your take in this one?
Well, there was just a discussion about this recently, and I think the biggest thing that's missing from NXG right now is something Fabiola pointed out, and that is the ability to do scripting. Because a lot of people, especially people who do fixed price projects, that's huge because it saves you a ton of time and it makes you more competitive. So if you're doing fixed price projects, I don't think you can go to NXG at all until scripting is there. At least that's my. But I mean, LabVIEW's come a long way. I started working in LabVIEW 6.1 was the first project I inherited. So like, I don't even think it didn't even have advanced structures. So like, you know, when I was talking about my buddy, the big bloated program, a lot of it was he had like, you know, 10 buttons on the screen. So he had to have like all 10 buttons and pull each one to see which one changed and have a big case structure. And so some of that stuff just that inherently makes your code harder to read. Right. And you didn't do anything wrong. That was the way you had to do it back then. So there's that. And like, it didn't even have the project window, which everybody takes for granted now. So trying to organize all your stuff and organize builds and stuff was kind of a pain. So I remember when they introduced the project, I thought that was a pretty good thing to do. I mean, I don't know, like everybody kind of resists change a little bit. So when it first came out, I was like, you know, pretty quickly I warmed up to it. And yeah, and like other things like the auto tool and quick drop. They didn't have quick drop for the longest time. So VI Analyzer, they didn't have that. That was a pretty recent thing too. So, I mean, I think current generation LabVIEW is definitely moving the right direction and has been. Like adding object-oriented programming is like huge, and actor framework and all that stuff, and the scripting tools. NXG, I don't know. I'm still like holding out. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, eventually it's just going to happen, and we're going to have to move over there. But my basic philosophy at the moment is I'm not overly investing in current generation LabVIEW, right? So like there's no, in my mind, there's no point in going out and inventing this whole big framework in current gen LabVIEW or whatever, because who knows if it'll actually port over to NXG. So I'm just kind of like in the water and like waiting to see what happens. And it's tricky, right? Because you got to time the jump perfectly, right? Because you don't want to come in too early, you don't want to come too late. So yeah, I don't know when that'll be, but I'm hoping that, you know, NI will let us know and everything will just kind of move over seamlessly. I kind of doubt that, but there will be some growing pains. But, you know, I look at it like this, like, you know, every new process has growing pains. Like when I started out, nobody was using source code control. Right? To learn how to use source code control actually required effort, right? So, you know, you had to learn like, oh, I have to commit this or whatever the SVN commands were. I forget the SVN ones anymore, but you know, there's that effort, and you have to set up the server, and you have to set up keys and passwords and all this stuff. And it, at first, it seems like a pain in the ass. You know, like, why am I doing this? You know, I don't want to waste all this time. But then after it becomes a habit, and you're just used to checking stuff in and out, then it's kind of seamless. And then you see the benefits of like, oh man, I screwed up yesterday. I shouldn't have made that change. You can just go back and pull it out, and boom, you're right back where you were. So, I mean, I think the transition to NXG for some people will be painful, but I think, you know, NI is trying to make it as painless as possible, and I think it brings some benefits. So we'll see what's happening.
Yeah, I think like that is like a very, very important take on that one, because for example, you know, in the beginning, like everybody is going to resist the change because you are used to certain way of doing things. But after a while, like once you know the benefits of using it, for example, you explained the source code control. I think like nowadays, like if you see anybody like not using the source code control, you might be, oh, why you are not using it? I think that is going to happen. But I think like at the same time, I think like a community has a very, very important role to play on this one. For example, you go to the CLA summit or like NI week or all these kind of events where like people say like how to move your code from like you know a current version of LabVIEW to the NXT and all this kind of something. So apart from this, like Sam, like what do you think? Like what are the other highlights of your career apart from, you know, becoming the LabVIEW champion this year?
I really liked talking at the European CLA Summit in Madrid. I thought that was cool to go over there and see that. my presentation, actually, I was a little worried about my presentation when I went there, and it went over really well, and I thought that was really cool. And GDevCon I thought was really great. I quite liked that. I enjoyed myself there. Like the first real realization for me was I spoke at NI Week way back in like 2012, and it was like my first time really doing any kind of public speaking stuff. And I got up there and I was all nervous, and I get my presentation, and I thought, like, I was like, I don't know, I thought it was kind of like lackluster and everything. Everybody else afterwards was like, oh yeah, that was great, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't do so bad. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I mean, just, like the LabVIEW community, I mean, I feel like it's very welcoming, and everybody gets along. Or I'll go out to the bar afterwards and have a few beers, and So.
Yeah, that's really a really good point. Yeah, Sam. Like in the beginning, like you think that like maybe I'm doing very bad or something, but always like we can actually add the value through our experience, what we have learned and what we have done in our project and all these kind of things. So Sam, apart from that one, like I think you have been like a regular to all these events and everything. So what is the like most highlights in this part of thing? Like for example, I spoke with Chris, and then he told that there's like a CPAD track for all the LabVIEW champions and everything. Apart from that one, like like what are the things like the customers or the lab users should not miss?
And then I would say the Lava Barbecue is definitely worth going to. It's a very good time to mix and mingle with people. Yeah, and then that week, I typically tend to go to a lot of the more technical sessions. So I go to a lot of the LabVIEW Champion sessions and stuff. Yeah, I would say like to me it's like I go to the technical sessions to learn stuff, but most of the rest of the conference is just a social thing for me. I go, I meet with people, I talk to people. It kind of helps to see what other people are doing, because you go in and you get new ideas, right? Because I mean, you do things a certain way and somebody else does it completely differently, and you're like, oh, well, maybe that way's better, or maybe it's not. Maybe it just reaffirms like, okay, well, they can go that way. I want to go this way. But, either way, it's still valuable, right? To just see the other options that are out there and see what's going on. And just talking to people and like bouncing ideas off of people, And I like, more than anything, I like the discussions. So like if they have like panel discussions, I definitely try to go to those because they're kind of unscripted and just, get people's thoughts on, whatever's going on. And I definitely like, even like when I give presentations, I think the most value comes from the discussion aside from the presentation. Like I have this thing that I want to talk about and somebody will ask a really interesting question and we go off on a tangent, but that's usually like the most important part and the most useful part for me. So, and it helps me as a presenter because then I actually learn something, right? Otherwise I'm just sitting up there droning on about stuff that I already know. Right. So to me, learning something new is always cool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting part. Yeah, you have mentioned and everything. So Sam, like, what do you want to tell the people? Like, sometimes I think like we had like this kind of discussion earlier as well. Many people do not actually perceive the LabVIEW as the proper programming language. What do you want to tell to the people like who want to start up taking up the LabVIEW to like do their test and automation software and system design?
Yeah, well, I would say several years ago maybe LabVIEW was not on par with other programming languages, but I feel like since they've added object-oriented programming and they have actor framework and all that, I feel like it's on par. To me, the advantage of LabVIEW, well, there's two advantages. One, for me personally, I agree with Chris. I think the diagrams make sense, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to staring at lines of code, I can look at the diagrams and I can kind of see what's going on. To me, that clicks. But like the biggest advantage, I think, is if you're writing programs that have to talk to hardware, NI has a huge range of hardware that out of the box talks to LabVIEW and works. And it's all integrated. So to me, that's like, because how much time can you spend trying to write a driver to talk to some esoteric thing, right? Or trying to figure out how this DLL works or something, right? So if you got something that works out of the box, and I mean, they've got stuff to talk over, GPIB and serial to just about anything. So to me, like having everything that communicates together and talks together and works like that platform approach, I think adds a lot of value. And then you mentioned test stand. I just did my first test stand projects this year. It's pretty amazing. It's definitely overwhelming, but it's super capable. And I mean, if you're out there trying to invent your own like test sequencer, like good luck, because I mean, the amount of stuff that test stand does is just ridiculous.
Yeah, really
which
awesome.
Is what makes it hard to use because it's like too overwhelming. But I don't know. Do you do much test stand stuff, Ram?
Yeah, I do like a little bit of stuff and everything. It's like you don't actually have to create your test sequences from the scratch and everything. Everything is already there. You just need to build the test steps, and then like you can use the code from written in any other programming languages as well. And like if you use LabVIEW, that's also really interesting and everything. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
Here, like in India as well, like a majority of the companies, like with the upsurge of what is it called, advent or whatever you want to say about the ADAS, the automated vehicles and all this kind of thing, electric vehicles, and it's going like crazy. Like everybody, they need to know LabVIEW and then like a test stand in majority of the firms, like they are doing a lot here. So Sam, like apart from this one, we have already discussed about your adventure and like your most of the highlights of your career. So what do you think? Like, what was the one of the greatest challenges you faced, and like how did you overcome using LabVIEW and so on?
Greatest challenges. That's interesting. Well, like the greatest technical challenge we had to overcome as a project was we had this project where they were building the first nuclear power plants they'd built in like 40 years. And they had to do all this testing when they install it. And they had this project where they had like several hundred compact Rios like spread throughout the plant. And what they wanted to do was, I guess when they install all the pipes, they have to have like a certain slope. I'm not a mechanical engineer, but they have to have a certain slope. And when they turn on the water for the first time and blast them with this hot water from the pumps, everything shifts, right? Because the metal expands and all that stuff. And they needed to verify like how much they moved, that they were all still in spec, but they wanted to like synchronize everything so that the second the pump came on, every measurement was synchronized from that. But you had 100 C Rios spread throughout the plant.
Wow.
How do you? And it was to the point where like they wanted it synchronized like to the level where like the normal ADD cards that do like the multiplexing, they couldn't do that. They had to do site hit simultaneous sampling on all the cards. And then they had to chain all the CRIOs together to get the data together. But then you're gathering all that data over the network. How do you coordinate all that data and timestamp everything and put it all together and then display it in a meaningful way? Because then you've got the display problem because you've got how many sensors with how many points. How do you display all that data and actually make sense of it? So that was an interesting project.
Yeah. So how did you overcome with that one? Like were you working in a team or like you were working alone or?
Yeah, I had the job. My job was to coordinate all the data once it came back over TCP/IP to read all right, basically the server that connected all these CRIOs, pulled all the data, and then aligned everything based on timestamps and tried to figure out like, oh, I've got all of this timestamp, but this one CRIO is missing. Then I got to wait till I get that one and then coordinate the next row. As far as like, we had a hardware engineer who did all the actual chaining all the CRIOs together. I think they used something called like iRig-B or something, some kind of hardware timing solution to get all the sample clocks together. Yeah.
So wow, that was really interesting. Yeah. So like Sam, like apart from that, like we'll come back to the community. So like you are now based in Colorado. You have got your own farm and everything. So how is the like LabVIEW base over there? Like, do you have any LabVIEW community over there?
We actually have an awesome LabVIEW community in Colorado. Wow. Yeah, there's like several LabVIEW champions that live within like a half-hour drive of me.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and we get together for coffee like every couple of weeks. And then we have a user group meeting. They meet every other month, but they usually get 30 to 40 people sometimes.
Wow, that's
pretty anywhere from like, yeah, on the low side, sometimes we get 10. On the high side, we've been known to get, yeah, 30 or 40 is probably misleading. I was gonna say on average we probably get 10 to 20, and the high side maybe 30 or 40. But yeah, and we used to have like a CLD summit in Denver, and people would come for that, and that got canceled. So I've been thinking about trying to start something up for that, but just haven't had quite enough interest. And then I had a kid, so that just kind of like derailed everything. So
that is like really really awesome and everything. Yeah. So what is the like what do you think? For example, that I think I've seen in the NI forum and everything, Denver Lab User Group, and then CLD Summit and everything. In India as well, like we recently started our own Lab User Group. Since like India is like a far more larger geographically, and it's like a very young market for lab users. We started the LabVIEW user group called InLab, and we have got like around like 142 members in the NI forum. But yeah, thank you very much. So at the moment, like we got around like 30 to 40 people will be joining in from like Skype as well, because it's not feasible for everyone to travel to Bangalore. So what advice would you like to give to us, like me and people like will be watching this? Maybe like they may not be part of the INLUG, or like they may not be part of the Colorado Lab User Group, but they might be elsewhere. Like how they can improve and then like invest their time to improve their skills in LabVIEW.
Yeah, so running a user group is hard. Sometimes finding presentations is like pulling teeth, I'm sure.
Okay.
My best recommendation is what we do at Alarm is we have like a handful of people who are kind of like in charge of the group, and everybody picks 1 month, and they're in charge of gathering presentations for that month. So the first thing I would say is start early gathering presentations. You need to start like several months ahead of time. But also, I think I think you said you had Chris Roebuck present at one of your yeah. So remote presenters are a great way to, if you're having trouble getting local presenters, getting remote presenters is really nice. And if you can pull somebody well known like Chris or somebody from the Champions Network, that's usually pretty good.
I would like to like formally invite you, like maybe like next like user meeting if you are available.
Yeah, no, send me an email and we can talk. And I'm happy to do some stuff. I've had other people come to the Alarm meetings and give presentations. They usually go over pretty well. Person presenter, I think me personally, I gain a lot of energy from like talking to people and interacting with them. And sometimes presenting, like I do a webinar every couple months, and when I'm presenting, sometimes I feel like I'm talking into a black hole, right? Because nobody's answering. And eventually I'm like, wait, is anybody listening? So as a presenter, I definitely like that. But the content and the interaction, you can still get plenty of interaction over Skype. And I mean, basically that's my advice is try early to get presentations. For a country as large as India, I mean, I would say like the more local the group is, the more community building. But I mean, if that's what you got, that's what you got. That's my advice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam, for your advice. And then like for example, like we're in a LabVIEW user group, and then I want like one more advice from you regarding the same topic. So there are like many people like who are tuning in through Skype. But sometimes what actually happens is like, let's say I do the presentation and I'm requesting from some query from them, whether like they are interested on this one or something, or like sometimes let's say like if they are like a regular presenters and everything, sometimes it becomes like a very monotonous and everything. For example, like I'm presenting every meeting and everything. Same thing can happen to like another person as well. So how can we encourage the other little bit passive presenters to get involved, so that like we can actually have more diverse knowledge base?
Well, one suggestion would be to remind them that they get recertification points, right? So nobody wants to take that exam again. So that's always a good sign. Yeah, I don't know. If people aren't naturally motivated to go present, I'm not. Basically, part of it is I found like we our alarm group. If I just send out an email and say who wants to present, nobody responds, right? But if I target a specific person and say, hey, do you have anything you'd like to present about? Then that kind of like you get more engagement. And also, like if you know somebody's working on a specific project, right? If you go to them and you're like, hey, can you tell us all about this thing that you're working on? You're kind of like you're building them up, right? You're like, hey, you're the expert on this. Can you come tell us? And people are more willing to be like, oh, I am the expert. Well, maybe I will go, you know. So it's like a little psychology, like, you know, trick.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
That actually makes sense.
People like to be told they're the expert. So if you tell them they're the expert, then they're like, oh, sure, I'll share my expertise with you. So
yeah, that's really important point, Sam. Like that's very interesting. So thank you very much, Sam, for your time. I think like we're moving towards the end of the interview. So
yep.
apart from this, like if you want to explain something like we might have like missed to like discuss, maybe you want to discuss some like you know the adventure you cannot forget through like your like a journey with LabVIEW and everything.
Yeah.
Any experience you want to share that maybe like it might have been like you know the uh, uh, co-adventure with like fellow LabVIEW champions or other people from the community that you know.
Yeah. Well, to me, the biggest adventure right now. So like, I feel like we kind of talked about how like, you know, writing code and making it work is like one level, and then you've got all the process and everything going on. What I'm finding right now is like the business side of things, like running your own consulting business. I'm finding there's a whole lot. There's the level of being able to deliver results, being able to write the LabVIEW code and coach, and then there's the whole business side of how do you market, how do you do sales, how do you do advertising, and all this stuff that's around it. And that I'm finding that is my biggest challenge right now. Like the LabVIEW side's easy. That's like no problem. So, which I watch everything you do, and I see all your ads and stuff. I'm like, that guy's doing a really good job. So I think
I'm trying. Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. Yeah, I'm trying my like level best, and then try to you know we're in a like a bit of like a same kind of ship and everything. So before we wrap up, Sam, like do you have any advice or like you want to say something to the LabVIEW community, the LabVIEW Champions community, the NI community, as well as the audience who is like watching this interview from your side?
I think the thing I take away, my advice would be to always keep learning, right? Like that continuous growth journey, right? I mean, no matter where you are right now, you can always learn more. And there's tons of resources out there. I mean, the NI forums, the LabVIEW Center of Excellence, the Champions, all those groups, that they all produce tons of content. So, I mean, if there's something you want to learn about, just go out and do it. And that would be my advice. You know, if you're just staying where you are, like everybody else is moving up, so left behind. So
yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So Sam, like that was like a very interesting interview we had with you. Thank you for very much for your time. Like you allocated this time to be speaking with our audience, and I know like many like LabVIEW champions like you know, and then from the community, they would be excited to hear from you and all this kind of stuff and something like that.
No, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So
yeah. So yeah, thank you very much, Sam. Like if we like have an opportunity next time, like hopefully like we'll have another conversation. I learned a lot from you like today, what you have done, and then like all this kind of stuff and so on. Yeah, thank you very much again.
Thank you, Ram. All right, bye.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for like tuning in to this interview. Like next time we'll be meeting with another LabVIEW personality and LabVIEW champion, discussing on their adventure using LabVIEW and guiding through the NI ecosystem.